Hey everyone, Carrie Beck here with Homeschool Coffee Break, where we help you stop the overwhelm so you actually can take a coffee break even as a homeschooler. Today we are here with Melanie, and we are going to be talking about a topic that a lot of you may just not really pay much attention to until you need to, and that's not the way to do it. We're going to be talking about teaching our kids social and emotional skills. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Well, it is absolutely my pleasure. I love talking about this topic, and I find that a lot of homeschooling parents have these types of issues as questions for me.
That is so good. And when I was a school teacher, we didn't even, I'm thinking, they didn't really talk. It was just like teach them their math, teach them their reading. And so as parents, we think, well, just teach them those academic skills. There is so much more that we need to be teaching our kids. So before we dive into the topic, could you just tell people a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I started off my career as a Christian clinical psychologist, and I felt called to homeschool, something that I did not want to do at all originally. I was going to have 2.5 children and work part-time as a psychologist, but I'm so thankful that God had other plans for me. And I ended up having 6 children, and all 6 of them are graduated. I have 2 still in college, and I have 1 adult son living at home while he is working full time and saving up some money. But I started writing story-based curriculum as a homeschooling mom because my kids really hated English, and I thought that was such a shame. I tell people that, and it is the absolute truth, the son who is now living with us as an adult offered to pay me not to teach English to them. So I thought something has to change. And so I ended up writing my own curriculum. I have a homeschooling podcast of my own called the Homeschool Sanity Show, and I speak at great homeschool conventions every year. And I just love helping homeschooling moms in particular find the joy in homeschooling that I really got to have all of my years of homeschooling.
I just love your story, and thank you for saying that your son, I was going to say your husband, paid you to not do English. Because I remember my first homeschool conference that I went to was in Houston, and there was the one thing I knew I was going to get was this grammar curriculum. I won't give the name. I was like, okay, that's been working for them in the Christian school, so I'll just do that. I can't take it home. I'll just order it Saturday afternoon before I left. I went home Friday night. I was at my parents' house, and just by myself, I started looking through everything. I went back the next day and completely changed my whole perspective of grammar. It wasn't necessarily story based, but it was
Mhm.
literature book based. And I didn't write my own curriculum, but I just think it is so important that if we teach things, we put it in the context of what they are doing. And this, I think this may be out of print, I don't know, but it would go back to open their book and let them find the verbs or whatever,
Mhm.
And so I just think stories are a great way even to teach math. Y'all think I'm crazy. Y'all can get on my little math blog post, but thank you for doing that. I know that blesses so many homeschoolers, though.
Well, it's really been a joy for me to write curriculum that I wanted to have as a homeschooling mom, but it just wasn't available. So I guess
Yeah.
God just saved that that opportunity for me.
Well, and I know as we talk later through this topic of social and emotional skills, I know you also use stories as well. But I guess my questions is sometimes do we teach kids these social and emotional skills just by homeschooling them?
Yes, we
You
do.
laugh.
We absolutely do. And nothing about my curriculum is meant to suggest that kids don't pick up social and emotional skills just as we go through life, just as we participate in family life, in church activities, in co-op activities, all of those kinds of things. However, there are kids, whether they have special needs or not, who require more explicit, direct teaching of these skills in order for them to pick up on them. And many times we as parents are surprised that our child hasn't picked up on some of these social and emotional skills just along the way. But sometimes kids, they just aren't picking up those cues, those clues. And then the other issue is that there are really, I would say, primarily emotional skills that most adults have not learned because it isn't taught in school. And what I found as a practicing psychologist is that I spent most of my time educating people about these skills that would have saved them so much grief had they learned them early in life. And so I want homeschooling parents to have access to these lessons that they can teach in an organized, time efficient way to their kids so that their kids won't have to pay $150 plus per hour to see a psychologist down the road.
That's so good. Okay, so could you just give us maybe an example of one of these emotional or social skills that people are dealing with?
Yeah, so I would say even when I was practicing many years ago, the number one problem that kids were having was anxiety. Today, that has become the true epidemic. And of course, it isn't just affecting our kids, it's affecting adults as well. I have homeschooling parents come up to me and say, I can't even do these things, deal with the anxiety myself,
Oh,
let alone teach it to my kids. And I completely understand that. And there is no judgment from me because, again, we haven't been taught these skills. So I will just give you a little tip that I
oh,
share with people, and I have been sharing this for years. When someone is anxious, whether that's you or your child, what they want to do to feel better is avoid. Oh, this makes me anxious, so I won't do it. And then I will feel comfortable and more at peace. And it does seem to make sense, like if something hurts, you don't do it. That's the advice we get, right? But if something hurts in an anxiety related way, that is the worst thing that you can do is avoid the thing that makes you anxious because that will only make the anxiety worse. It will not only get bigger for that specific thing that you're trying to avoid, but it will spread. Soon, more and more things will make you anxious. So many people know about agoraphobia, where someone becomes so impaired by anxiety that they are stuck in their homes. They're prisoners of their homes. They're too afraid to leave their home. And that can happen. Most of the time, what happens is someone will be out and about. Maybe they're at the grocery store and they have a panic attack, or maybe it's not even a full-blown panic attack, but their heart begins to race. Maybe they have an arrhythmia that occurs, and who knows why. But they start to think, oh boy, you know what? This grocery store makes me anxious. I never, ever, ever want to feel that heart racing, feeling like I'm about to have a heart attack and die sensation again. So I will no longer go maybe to this grocery store. Maybe it's this particular store that's a problem. Soon it becomes any grocery store. And then it becomes, I'm feeling it at church. I can't go to church anymore. I have to have my groceries delivered. I have to watch church online. And you can quickly see how the person can become completely isolated and disabled and just tell you, and they're very well meaning, that they simply cannot expose themselves to these situations that will produce the same types of symptoms. And I think with our kids, it's especially hard because we want to protect them. We want them to be happy and feel at peace, feel comfortable. And so we might agree that, oh no, you shouldn't join a sports team. You shouldn't try out to be in this play or musical or present, play in a recital, or go to a co-op where you're going to be with a bunch of kids and that's going to make you anxious. And we are really impairing our kids' ability to have a happy and successful life. And so if nothing else that I say hits home with you, I hope that it is avoidance is it's a death spiral. It will spiral you and your child into such a dark, isolated place that you do not want to go there. So of course, what you need is help, whether that is in terms of self-help, and there are a variety of excellent self-help materials out there, or professional help to gradually have you or your child expose themselves to situations that make them anxious and develop the skills to cope with anxiety.
That is so interesting and so good. And it makes so much sense. And then you just throw COVID on 4 years ago, and
Right.
people are like freaked out about things,
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so thank you for sharing that. I really didn't think about it, but I also think parents, you may be doing it. I mean, if y'all have been around me, I talk about modeling and mentoring. And if you become anxious and you avoid things, your kids, without you saying, hey, don't do that, they're just going to naturally do it. I was in a Bible study with some young moms several years ago, and one of her prayer requests was that her daughters, who were maybe like 8 and 12, would not be anxious. And she said, because she knows she deals with anxiety, and she is a nurse and she was dealing with it. It's not like
Mhm.
she was just like well, she wouldn't have even been there if she wasn't dealing with it. But she just saw little bits of it in her kids, and she wanted to be able to walk with them as well. And so I think some of it is just being aware of what's going on. So I don't know
Right.
if you agree or what.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So uh, do we avoid teaching these skills only to children that are struggling with them? How do we handle all of that?
Yeah, so I'm a psychologist and I know a lot, about social and emotional skills and what my kids need to be taught. However, it was very challenging for me as a busy homeschooling mom of six who needed to teach math and English and science and history and on and on. And, other non-social and emotional life skills. I wanted my kids to be able to cook and to do basic repairs, and I wanted them to speak a foreign language. And you see where I'm going with this. And it falls through the cracks because you ask yourself, well, what's the most important? Well, I want my child to be able to read. I want them to be able to write well. I want them to be able to do math because that will really be important for their future career success. And then time just gets away from you. And the other issue is you don't even know where to begin. Where do you start with this? And that is why I created a curriculum that would make it easy for parents to incorporate it into their homeschooling day so that they wouldn't have to do all the research and try to figure out what skills should I be even teaching? How can I teach them in a way that is engaging for even the youngest children who also need to be taught these skills.
That's so interesting. So why do you think parents neglect? I mean, do you think they're afraid of it? I mean, I will say this, that the word I thought of when you were talking was overwhelm. And it's not even
Yeah.
just teaching our kids. It's like, well, yeah, I've got all that. Plus, I got to cook. And, they keep wanting to eat 3 meals a day. And we got to do laundry and
Hmm.
all the things. So
Yes.
they're just like totally overwhelmed.
Right.
I think of that as like, okay, then I'll just not worry about that. I'll do the things I can check off the thing, the box.
Hmm.
What are the real reasons that people neglect teaching this?
Well, it is what you just said. It's the overwhelm. It's like I mentioned earlier, some parents feel that they don't know. As I said, many parents ask me questions. How do I deal with this? How do I deal with a child who gets frustrated easily and acts out of that frustration? I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure how to discipline. I'm not sure how to deal with a teen who's depressed. Even though my curriculum, my first series is just for elementary students, parents are just at a loss. And then when they look for resources, they don't know if the resources that they have found fit with their family's values and worldview. And that is another really confusing issue. Am I going to pick up a book or start doing some type of program? And then I'm going to find out, oh, I don't agree with this at all. And so I think it's a variety of things. Sometimes people might feel like, oh, it's admitting that I have failed somehow. If I say, oh, I need to teach my kids, or that there's something wrong with my child, that they need this more specific instruction. And I, I think that all children need instruction. And honestly, so many adults do too. These are, most of them, I would say, are issues that everyone can benefit from, including parents who really are well adjusted socially and emotionally. I mean, we can always improve our skills. So I think if we recognize this is so important. And so one final thing that I would say is that what I found to be the biggest obstacle in the way of effective homeschooling in our home was the social and emotional issues, especially sibling rivalry, which is another topic that we cover in this curriculum. That, when my kids are arguing, they're kind of battling over, my kids were always fighting over this special seat and the blankets, and they had to have a blanket. They had to have a certain blanket, the best blanket. Those kinds of things got in the way of us getting our academic work done and getting it done, quickly and effectively. And at first, I felt so frustrated because I felt like they are interrupting our school. Okay. And quickly, I learned that no, this is our school. This is our school. So these social and emotional skills will be a huge determining factor in our kids' career and relationship success. So we shouldn't just freak out that we have to put math on the back burner and deal with these other issues. And I think if we have a plan for what to teach and how to teach it, that we will just be a lot more relaxed, and we can get, I think, more of those academic lessons done.
That's so interesting because I mean, I've been interviewing like homeschool experts or whoever for different conferences for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And one of the things that people come back to over and over is academics are important, but it's not always the most important. And what you are saying right here is just so true, because one of the words that they use over and over is relationships, which really, if you have social and emotional skills, then your relationships, you're really focusing on relationships. And these are people like you and me that are empty nesters. We've already done it, and looking back, they're not in the midst of it, but these are the people that look back and say, relationships are so important. Academics are, but we've got to prioritize relationships. And I think that's just a little different twist, a way of saying exactly what you're saying. And I think I just want to say, I wrote it down. It is not an interruption, but this is school for the day. So thank you for saying that.
Yes.
Um, so what kind of resources did you find as you were researching different options
Yes.
for parents?
I really should not have been surprised by this because, I'm an experienced homeschooler, and I took a look at all the different types of traditional school curricula that was available, outside of homeschooling. And that is exactly the type of thing that I found for social and emotional skills. And what I mean by that is worksheets. It really surprised me, even though it shouldn't have, because the students who have the greatest difficulty with social and emotional skills also tend to have difficulty academically. They may be dyslexic. They may have sensory processing disorders that make learning challenging. They may have trouble with dysgraphia or dyscalculia. And especially those more language arts focused skills, when you ask a child to try to then learn social and emotional skills by completing worksheets and having to write things out longhand, that made no sense to me. And then, of course, worksheets are not going to teach our kids how to interact in the real world. So, it might be an okay filler, but there needs to be instruction that is really something that's experiential. So kids can really remember, and that's where story comes in. I wasn't finding story-based materials to teach this, except that there are wonderful picture books that will teach a specific skill. And so I included lists of those in my curriculum, because I think the more that we can use story and other engaging ways of teaching, the more likely it is that our kids are going to really experience growth in that particular area. But then again, if all you have are storybooks that teach one-off topics, how am I, as a homeschooling parent, supposed to organize this whole curriculum and figure out, what should I teach first, and, and then what, and, what's a higher level skill versus a basic skill? And so I felt like we still need a curriculum that is organized. I definitely needed that. Even with my experience, I needed someone to say, first do this and then do that. And I had that in my other teaching. I wasn't going, well, should I teach long division before I teach the math facts? No. I had someone telling me, no, this is the scope and sequence of what you're going to teach. And so I decided that I could really be helpful to homeschooling parents by putting a scope and sequence of skills to teach together. And I will say that I have had parents say to me, okay, my child doesn't struggle with this particular skill. Do I have to teach that? And every time a homeschooling parent asks me that kind of question, do I have to teach it the way you have this laid out? Of course not. That is why you homeschool. You're the boss. You're the general contractor of your child's education. You get to use everyone else's that you want their expertise to inform your decision making about how to present these materials. So no, you don't have to, but I think it would be a good idea for parents to review the material that I have, just to make sure. And then I'm just going to interject right here, to address this issue of having a nasty surprise, because I've had that too. I've had it where maybe I'm reading a book or even using a particular curriculum and I'm like, okay, I don't agree with this. I don't like this at all. This does not fit with my family's values. I include with my curriculum a course where I am teaching the skills in a child-friendly short video. And I use, child-friendly examples, but I give parents the notes of exactly what I'm going to be teaching. So even if they don't have time to preview that video before they show it, they aren't going to be surprised by what I am sharing. And then I have materials that are for a secular family and materials who are for faith-based families.
That's so awesome, because one of the questions you mentioned this a while back was about, does whatever you're looking at fit their family, fit their values? And the things that you're saying right now, I think, are things that a family needs to consider. And just the idea that you have the notes, secular and faith-based, of course, a book of lists. The other thing is, I mean, when you're talking about picture books, I mean, I still remember reading picture books, and some of the picture books I'm like, oh, I'm glad we read that, because that is not how you are supposed to act, and we need to talk about other things. And for me, y'all know I'm a faith-based person, and so I would say, is that how God wants us to act? And even a 5-year-old, you can have a conversation with that type of thing. Is
Yeah.
there anything else you'd say about that, or about finding what fits each person, not person, but I think it's a family choice. Any other suggestions?
For sure. So with the books, as part of we call it a training manual, but it's actually the teacher's guide for the curriculum. There are stories, and I should just say this, I can't believe I haven't even brought it up yet. The whole concept. So I decided to make the stories about 3 alien siblings who were visiting NASA's space camp in Alabama. And NASA has asked the campers who are attending that particular space camp to help them make this exchange program work by teaching the aliens social and emotional skills. And there is a very specific reason that I wrote it this way, because many times when kids struggle with their own social skills, for example, they feel called out. And I didn't want mom to have to say, hey, Johnny, it's time for your social and emotional skills curriculum. And the other siblings get a pass because you're the one with the problem. And, that is just, kids are very sensitive to that. And sometimes they don't have a very good objective perspective of their own behavior. And so when I make the aliens misbehave and do kind of crazy things, it gives kids that objectivity. And then I ask kids what should be done about the aliens' misbehavior. And both of the options that I give them in a you choose type of format are common responses to a challenging behavior, but they're both ineffective, at least in comparison to what I would recommend. So kids get a chance to say what they think will happen when these particular reactions are chosen, and then they get to see the funny things that occur as a result. And I try to make it, entertaining and fun, but also somewhat realistic. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, there is a story in level 1 where one of the aliens is complaining about the food at space camp. And then I have one of the options is the other staff member, the group leader who kind of hears this complaint says, you know what, I don't really like this food either. And so she starts complaining about the food. And then of course, the space camp cooks are wanting to leave because they feel so unappreciated. And that's actually fairly realistic. You know, if we just keep complaining about people doing their job, and they're trying to do their job well, then they may get really frustrated and just want to quit, right? So that is an example of how I set it up so kids can start to think through these things in a fun, fictional way before I come along. And then I do have parents ask them, well, okay, these two options didn't work. So what do you think that they should have done? And so they get a chance to say first, and then they can watch the video where I share some skills that I'm wanting the campers to teach the aliens during that particular lesson. And then we move on to picture books. It is one of the activities that parents will choose to teach this particular skill. And parents are allowed to find their own books in their personal collection. I was just asking on my Facebook page how many books homeschooling parents thought that they had in their homes. And there were numerous people who said 5,000, 4,500, 5,000 books. So they may have a title that is perfect, that they can just pull it off their shelf and read it and use that particular title. They can find a book that they like at the library. But if they don't even know where to begin, I will give them access to a short list of options that we have pre-screened as likely to not be objectionable, but we encourage parents to read the reviews, especially the 1-star reviews, to make sure that there isn't something that wouldn't work for your family.
Well, and I would even go a step farther. If it's a picture book, I mean, just pick it up and read it. I know you can't always read a whole chapter book,
Right.
but even with my kids, because I am watching my kids and my grandkids, and I'm like, I didn't let them read much that I hadn't at least read some of them in the series. I didn't necessarily read every book, but I wanted to know the content, and some of them, my friends were all letting them read, and others I wasn't. But a
Mhm.
picture book, and a picture book is not just for 3 and 4-year-olds. You can use it with older kids, and I really
Right.
like that. And when you're
Yes.
talking about the food thing, I'm like, this is not just a camp. This is how kids treat their moms sometimes. Let's be really honest.
Right.
We got in something, I don't know what it was, but we were in some discussion online, and this mom was talking about her kids complaining about her food one night, and she just took it away and made a piece of dry toast and then took it back in there and said, there's your dinner, And I'm not saying that was right or wrong, but this
Right.
is a real issue
Mhm.
because kids take things for granted, and that whole idea of complaining. And I'm gonna go one more step further. Sometimes my kids complain because they heard me, oh no,
Right.
complaining. And I had to look at myself sometimes
Mhm.
before I could change something with my kids. So I don't know if you've
Right.
experienced that, but those are just my thoughts that came to mind.
That's right. Well, speaking of resources, the other thing that is a part of the training manual is in the secular version, we study a fable or a folk tale, and it's from the perspective of social and emotional skills. So not the moral, but more like, okay, what are some of the behaviors that we see in the characters? It's usually animals
Yeah.
that is something that we can discuss about what did you notice about these behaviors that were problematic, and how would you respond, and that kind of thing. And I really love how that turned out, because I have not seen that approach to fables and folk tales necessarily before. I mean, sometimes, yes, along the way, you bring up these social and emotional skills, but that was intentional. And then in the faith-based version, we discuss Bible stories. Again, we're not discussing the theology, we're discussing the behaviors, how people are relating to one another and how they are feeling in this particular story. And I think what is really exciting about this is that I think in going through these stories, whichever version you choose, you will find yourself using a variety of books and movies that you are seeing as a family as a way to teach further these social and emotional skills.
That's so good. And I know as a faith-based person, now I use fables for all different kinds of things, Aesop's fables, whatever. But I love that, as I would use the Bible stories and the fables personally if I were doing this all over again. So this
Yes.
has been so interesting. If people wanted, I mean, this has been really good. And I think it is a very neglected skill, the social and emotional skills. If people wanted to, just touch base with you or find out more about you, where could they do that?
Yeah, so you can check out my website, funtolearnbooks.com. Right on the front page, up on the top right, you will see something about Space Camp, which is where the aliens are. And so if you click on that, it will give you more information about the curriculum. It is available in both digital and print, and then, as I said, in secular and faith-based. The course that goes along with it is included at no extra charge, and the entire curriculum can be used with a group, a homeschool group. It can be used in a class, and you do not have to purchase more than one copy of the curriculum. It is my passion to see as many people trained in these skills as possible, and I don't want cost to be a factor.
That is so good. Wherever you're listening to this, just look in the show notes, because we will have all the links to all of this, so that you can go and just review this. So, Melanie, I just appreciate you coming today, and just want to know, is there anything that you would just like to leave us in closing?
You know, I would encourage every homeschooling mom listening to not get down on yourself if you haven't been teaching these skills at all, or as much as you feel like is necessary, because we are all on a journey. And I really believe that it's more important that our kids always seeing us seeking to improve rather than being perfect from the get-go. So just be encouraged.
That is so good. Don't be perfect, because none of us are. So, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time today.
It was my pleasure.
All right. I'm Carrie Beck with Homeschool Coffee Break. We'll talk to you next time.